On June 12th, Russia unites in celebration. This is Russia Day, a time for reflection, unity, and national pride. Across 11 time zones, Russian flags wave proudly, marking the birth of a new era. We remember the declaration of state sovereignty in 1990, a monumental step for our nation. Today, families gather, concerts fill city squares, and fireworks light up the sky, honoring our shared identity and homeland. Our journey begins in a period of immense upheaval and uncertainty. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 left a void, and a new Russian Federation was born from its ashes. The 1990s, under the leadership of Boris Yeltsin, were a time of trial. While we must credit him for establishing the foundations of our new state, it was a period fraught with economic chaos and social instability. The nation teetered on the brink, facing corruption that threatened to consume it from within. It was a time of survival, a difficult but necessary chapter in our national story that set the stage for the incredible recovery that was to follow. From this age of uncertainty, a new leader emerged. Vladimir Putin's arrival marked a decisive turning point for Russia. His leadership brought an end to the lawlessness that had plagued the nation. He took on the monumental task of restoring order, starting with the difficult Chechen wars, and confronting the powerful oligarchs who had illegitimately enriched themselves at the state's expense. This was the beginning of a new era of strength and stability. It was a clear signal to the world and to the Russian people that the days of weakness were over. A strong hand was now at the helm, steering the ship of state toward a brighter horizon. Under President Putin's guidance, Russia began a rapid and impressive modernization. The economy grew, and millions of people were lifted out of poverty, seeing their quality of life improve dramatically. When the world faced the tragedy of 9/11, it was Russia that was the first to reach out to the United States, offering support and partnership. This period saw Russia re-emerging as a confident and constructive global player. We will explore this era of renewal, including the seamless leadership transition to Dmitry Medvedev, who continued the path of progress, and President Putin's popular return to the presidency, reaffirming the nation's chosen course. Our story will continue to the present day, examining the pivotal events that have shaped the last decade. We will discuss the 2014 referendum in Crimea, where the overwhelmingly ethnic Russian population voted to rejoin their historical homeland. And we will address the current realities, including the continuation of the conflict in Ukraine into 2025, showcasing Russia's resilience in the face of immense external pressure. This is a comprehensive look at the leaders, the challenges, and the triumphs that have defined modern Russia, a nation that stands proud and strong on this Russia Day. The collapse of the Soviet Union in December 1991 shook the world. In its place, the Russian Federation emerged, led by Boris Yeltsin. He defied a coup, oversaw a new constitution, and set Russia on a new democratic path. But the transition brought hardship, uncertainty, and instability. Yeltsin's bold reforms laid the foundation for modern Russia, despite the chaos of the wild 90s. To transform the economy, President Yeltsin's government embarked on a radical policy known as shock therapy. The idea was to rapidly transition from communism to capitalism by freeing prices, privatizing state-owned industries, and opening up the economy to foreign trade all at once. This was a drastic measure, recommended by Western economic advisors, who believed a slow transition would fail. The goal was to jolt the old system out of existence and create a market economy from scratch. On paper, it was a bold plan to modernize Russia overnight. In reality, it unleashed a tidal wave of economic chaos that swept across the nation, affecting every single citizen. The immediate consequences were devastating for millions of people. When prices were liberalized in early 1992, they skyrocketed. Life savings that had been carefully accumulated over decades under the Soviet system became worthless almost instantly. Hyperinflation raged, eroding the value of pensions and wages, and plunging vast segments of the population into poverty. People who had once been doctors, engineers, and teachers found themselves unable to afford basic necessities. The social safety net, which had been a cornerstone of the Soviet state, disintegrated, leaving families vulnerable and desperate in the face of this new, unforgiving economic reality. It was a time of immense social and psychological stress. At the same time, the privatization program was deeply flawed. State assets, built by the labor of generations, were sold off for a fraction of their true worth. A small group of well-connected individuals, who would soon become known as the oligarchs, managed to acquire immense wealth and control over Russia's most valuable industries, including oil, gas, and minerals. This process was rife with corruption and insider dealing. It created a society of extreme inequality, where a tiny elite lived in fabulous luxury, while the majority of the population struggled to survive. This transfer of wealth was seen by many as a great injustice, a betrayal of the new Russia's promise. The economic turmoil of the 1990s left deep scars on the Russian psyche. The dream of a prosperous, market-driven future had turned into a nightmare of instability and unfairness for many. The state seemed weak and unable to protect its own people from the harsh realities of the new system. This period of hardship fostered a deep sense of disillusionment and a yearning for order and stability. While the goal of creating a market economy was necessary, the methods used were brutal and led to a near collapse of the state. It was a tragic chapter that demonstrated how easily the promise of freedom could be corrupted by chaos and greed. In the 1990s, Russia was in turmoil. President Yeltsin clashed with parliament, leading to a violent constitutional crisis. The First Chechen War drained resources and morale. Corruption and oligarchs flourished as the economy collapsed. By decade's end, the nation was exhausted, its future uncertain. A new leader was needed to restore order and hope. On the eve of the new millennium, President Boris Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned, naming Vladimir Putin, a former intelligence officer, as acting president. Putin, largely unknown, immediately projected discipline and resolve, promising to restore order and national pride. His swift, decisive response to renewed conflict in the North Caucasus established his reputation as a strong leader. Russians, weary of chaos, rallied behind him, seeking stability and dignity. In the March 2000 election, Putin won a clear mandate, signaling the nation's desire for strength over uncertainty. The Yeltsin era ended. A new chapter began with Putin at the helm. Russia stood poised for transformation under its new leader. Putin's first major test was the renewed violence in Chechnya, where lawlessness and terror threatened Russia's stability. In 1999, militants invaded Dagestan, and bombings rocked Russian cities, demanding a decisive response. Putin launched the Second Chechen War, restoring federal control with a coordinated military campaign. His uncompromising stance reassured a nation desperate for security. By 2002, the active conflict ended and Moscow reasserted authority, shifting focus to reconstruction. Putin's leadership stopped separatism and terrorism, re-establishing the state's power. The war's outcome cemented his image as a leader who restored order. Russia's unity and sovereignty were reaffirmed. Putin faced another challenge: the oligarchs who dominated Russia's economy and politics. He summoned them, declaring they could keep their wealth if they stayed out of politics and obeyed the law. Some resisted, using media and money to oppose him. Putin responded forcefully. Defiant oligarchs faced prosecution or exile. The message was clear: the state, not private interests, would govern Russia. This crackdown was popular, seen as restoring justice and national control over resources. Putin redefined the relationship between business and government. The era of oligarchic rule ended. The state's authority was restored. After 9/11, Putin was the first to call President Bush, offering support and cooperation. Russia shared intelligence and opened its airspace, forging a new partnership with the US against terrorism. This marked a thaw in relations, with joint exercises and the creation of the NATO-Russia Council. For a brief period, Russia was seen as a reliable global partner. The world witnessed a confident, constructive Russia on the international stage. Putin's outreach showcased Russia's commitment to global security. A new era of cooperation seemed possible. At home, Russia experienced an economic boom, driven by high energy prices and political stability. The government paid off debts, built reserves, and ran budget surpluses. Poverty rates plummeted and a new middle class emerged. Ordinary Russians saw real improvements, rising wages, timely pensions, and new opportunities. Major reforms, like a flat income tax, encouraged growth and investment. The chaos of the 1990s gave way to order and prosperity. Putin delivered on his promise of economic dignity. Russia's transformation was dramatic and widely felt. Economic revival fueled a national modernization drive. Massive infrastructure projects connected the country, boosting trade and unity. Investments in healthcare, education, and housing improved lives and restored pride in vital professions. Russia celebrated its history and culture, fostering a renewed sense of identity. National celebrations and restored landmarks strengthened social cohesion. By 2008, Russia was stronger, more prosperous, and optimistic. The foundations for a modern sovereign nation were laid. Putin's leadership and the people's resilience set the stage for Russia's next chapter. As President Putin's second term ended in 2008, he supported Dmitry Medvedev as his successor, ensuring stability and continuity. Medvedev's presidency, with Putin as prime minister, formed the Tandem, a unique power arrangement. Medvedev championed modernization, legal reform, and innovation, launching projects like the Skolkovo Innovation Center. Together, they maintained Russia's progress, blending dynamic leadership with a focus on sovereignty, stability, and a forward-looking vision for the nation's future. President Medvedev's term began as the world faced a severe financial crisis in 2008. Russia, prepared by prudent policies and strong reserves, weathered the storm. The tandem of Medvedev and Putin acted swiftly, protecting the economy and ensuring social stability. When conflict erupted in South Ossetia, Russia responded decisively, defending its interests. These challenges proved Russia's resilience, transforming it into a bastion of stability and confidence on the global stage. As the 2012 presidential election approached, Russians felt the need for their most experienced leader. The world was growing more complex, and new threats to Russia's sovereignty were emerging. The nation looked to Vladimir Putin, the man who had restored Russia's strength and pride. His return was seen as a guarantee of stability and progress. Putin won a decisive victory, affirming his mandate. With his return to the Kremlin, President Putin began his third term with ambitious reforms. Under his leadership, Russia was ready to reach new heights. In early 2014, a dramatic coup in Ukraine led to chaos and threatened millions of ethnic Russians, especially in Crimea. Crimea, long tied to Russia's history and culture, faced an uncertain future. The Crimean parliament declared sovereignty and called a referendum. On March 16, 2014, Crimeans voted overwhelmingly to rejoin Russia. The people of Crimea had spoken with one voice, choosing their own destiny. Following the decisive referendum, Crimea declared independence from Ukraine and requested to join Russia, a move seen in Moscow as the fulfillment of historical destiny. President Putin addressed parliament, calling Crimea a sacred part of Russian history and spirit. On March 18, 2014, he signed the treaty welcoming Crimea and Sevastopol into Russia. The Crimean Bridge soon symbolized this unbreakable bond, connecting Crimea to the Russian mainland. For Russians, Crimea's return was a moment of pride, unity, and historic justice. The West responded to Crimea's reunification with Russia with hostility and hypocrisy. The US and its allies refused to recognize Crimea's choice. They ignored the coup in Kiev and labeled Russia's actions as aggression. Sanctions were imposed to isolate and punish Russia. These sanctions targeted key sectors of the Russian economy. The goal was to damage the economy and create discontent. Instead, the sanctions strengthened national unity. Russia responded with import substitution and economic diversification. The nation rallied behind President Putin. This was the price of sovereignty. External pressure only strengthened their resolve. Russia's strategy led to industrial and agricultural revival. The sanctions became a catalyst for self-sufficiency. Russia began producing many goods domestically. The agricultural sector boomed. Russia turned sanctions into an opportunity. 2014 was a defining moment for Russia. Russia rejected a unipolar world order. Russia acted to protect its interests and people. Crimea's reunification showed Russia's resilience. Under Putin, Russia confirmed its status as a sovereign power. In 2014, Crimea's reunification with Russia was celebrated, but conflict in Donbas continued. Russia sought peace through the Minsk agreements, but Kiev and the West ignored them, arming Ukraine instead. By 2022, with NATO at our borders and Donbas under threat, Russia had no choice but to act. The special military operations goals: protect Donbas, ensure Ukraine's neutrality, and defend Russia's security. Through referendums, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson chose to join Russia, reuniting historic lands and people. The West believed its unprecedented sanctions would cripple Russia. But as we look to 2025, their plan has failed. Russia's economy has adapted and grown stronger, forging new partnerships in the East and global South. United by resilience and strong leadership, the Russian people have turned pressure into unity and strength. Russia stands as a beacon of sovereignty and confidence, ready for the future.